Hi students, welcome to a lesson on how to use a semicolon. This is a sort of a fun lesson because we're using a website called the Oatmeal, which has lots of fun pictures and sentences that we can use to practice using semicolons. So this is our website, the Oatmeal. It's got more lessons on different things, including grammar, punctuation, as well as history and other courses as well. So today we're looking at the semicolon. This is a continuation on the grammar lecture on punctuation, commas, and semicolons. Can't spell. Colons. But we're going to focus on semicolons using this lesson here. It's going to be fun. So, according to this website, people are afraid of using semicolons, but it's actually very useful in academic writing, and we're going to look at that now. So, here's the first question. Why use a semicolon at all? I mean, we have commas and we have periods, so there's a reason for using them, and this lesson we're going to learn why. We use a semicolon to connect two independent clauses together. These sentences in the website is kind of funny, but we can learn the purpose of semicolons nonetheless. The sentence here reads, "The ice cream truck man drove by my house today. He had big hairy knuckles." So here is the big hairy knuckles. And we have two sentences. We have the ice cream truck man drove by my house today. So we have the subject, verb, and object. And then we have the second sentence. He, subject, had big hairy knuckles. So normally you can write these two sentences separately with a period in between them. So when you have a period, you are taking a big breath to pause in between. So it might read something like this. The ice cream truck man drove by my house today. He had big hairy knuckles. So if the sentences are related, and it's talking about the ice cream truck man, and you wanted to connect them better, you can use a semicolon instead. There's no pause, and it might sound like this. The ice cream truck man drove by my house today. He had big hairy knuckles. Now notice something. Instead of using a comma, which would read like this, the ice cream truck man drove by my house today. He had big hairy knuckles. If you use a comma, that is going to be a comma splice, which is not correct. So put the comma, that's actually not allowed because you cannot join two independent clauses with just a comma alone. If you wanted to use a comma, you would have to use a conjunction word like and. The ice cream truck man drove by my house today and he had big hairy knuckles. However, since we're using semicolons, instead of a comma, use a semicolon for two independent clauses. So when you use a semicolon, you are eliminating the pause, the big breath that you get from the period. And an advantage of the semicolon is you just use that punctuation and you don't have to use words like and, but, no, or yet. So that's a reason why you might want to use semicolons. So how do you use it? First, we need to check. Check if your sentence has two independent clauses. Look at the sentence below. My aunt also has big hairy knuckles. She loved to wash and comb them. So which one is clause 1? If you said my aunt also had hairy knuckles, that's correct. That's the first independent clause, which means you can read it as a separate sentence. Where do you think the second clause is? If you thought she loved to wash and comb them, that's correct. That's the second clause. It also can be its own sentence, and you don't need that last part. You can just simply say she loved to wash and comb them. And that's just a joke picture about knuckle shampoo. So yeah, either way, remember you use a semicolon in between two independent clauses, like this. And the good check is to see if each clause can be used as its own sentence. That's why it's called independent. Here's a tip. Remember how you have rules for comma that you use a conjunction like this? Remember, these are commas, like but, or, nor, and so on. So this is good for commas only, using conjunctions, comma and conjunction. With a semicolon, you only use the semicolon itself. So sentence 1, sentence 2, or clause 1, clause 2. You see? Here is a sentence where you use the comma rule instead of the semicolon rule. My aunt's hairy knuckles are magnificent indeed, but I have no desire to stroke them. So here you're using a contrast conjunction like but. Now if you were to write this sentence with semicolon rules, it might look like this. My aunt's hairy knuckles are magnificent indeed. Semicolon. I have no desire to stroke them. Stroke is like to rub with your hand, like to pet. So notice here, if you just use the semicolon, there is no conjunction anymore, because that's only for commas. Now the advantage of using a comma and a conjunction is that you can add meaning to the connection between sentences. For example, and could be for similar things, but could be for different clauses, or is similar to but it's not the opposite. And nor, it's two negatives. So with practice, you will be able to use both types. The semicolon rule for related sentences that you can connect together without conjunctions, and using the comma rule with conjunctions to show a particular kind of relationship between the two clauses. Alright, so another tip to help you is figuring out when to use a semicolon. So here, if you want to make a bond between the two statements, but you don't want to use a conjunction, and these are related in some way or they contrast with each other, then you use a semicolon. Here we have two sentences. I gnaw on old car tires and it strengthens my jaw so I'll be better conditioned for bear combat. So it looks like this man wants to use his teeth to fight bears.
Yeah.
Two sentences. I gnaw on old car tires and it strengthens my jaw so I'll be better conditioned for bear combat. So two clauses connected by a semicolon, and this shows the relationship between biting on tires and fighting bears. So how would you do this with the comma rule? Well, actually, you might not be able to use the comma rule. So I gnaw on old car tires. Now consider the relationship. There is a reason why this person is biting on car tires. It would be because. Now, because is not so much a conjunction word, so you can't use commas with it. You might be tempted to go comma because, but that's not allowed. It's not and or but or nor or. You simply put because it strengthens my jaw, and so on. See? So here, just the connecting word because. Here's the next sentence. I fought the bear and won. Also, I never kiss plague rats on the mouth. Take a look at these sentences. Do you see a relationship between bears, fighting bears, and kissing rats? This one is less related because this one is just the action in sentence 1 and the reason why he is biting old car tires to fight bears. But this one, fighting a bear and kissing rats, they're not related. So if the two sentences are not related, you cannot use a semicolon in that case. Instead, notice this sentence use a transition word. Also. So that's another technique for connecting sentences, but these are for sentences that are not explicitly related, that you can't use a conjunction or a connecting word or a semicolon in this case. So here it says, fighting bears and kissing rats are not related. So instead you use a period and then a transition word. The function of a semicolon serves as a small pause in a sentence that is slightly bigger, longer than a comma, but not as long as a period. So here's just an illustration of showing how this might work. So the guy is running from the bear. There's no pause. He must keep running. So a comma would read something like this. I'll use a sentence like this. The bear is chasing me, comma, and I have to run away. So here you have the comma. It's a brief pause, so it reads, the bear is chasing me and I have to run away. If I were to change this to a semicolon sentence, it would read like this. The bear is I'll use a different sentence. I dropped my lunch box, semicolon. The bear is now distracted. So here, the semicolon serves as a medium-sized pause, and a good type of sentence to use is where the two independent clauses are related but not so closely related that you can use a comma and conjunction to specify a relationship. Here you see the bear is distracted because, well, the lunchbox is dropped and he's eating the food inside. But here the semicolon rule is used to give a moderate pause between two clauses. I dropped my lunchbox and the bear is distracted. Here, the last one. I'll use a sentence like this. The bear ate the food. Full stop. Now he is fast asleep. So the period serves as a complete stop in the sentence, two separate sentences, and a big pause, so you would read it like this. The bear ate the food. Now he is fast asleep. So just like the picture, the bear just stopped altogether. The semicolon serves as a medium-sized pause in sentences, two independent clauses that are related to each other. There are other uses for the semicolon as well. You can use it within the sentence, especially if the sentence has been broken down into parts where there's a comma in it. Let's take a look at that. So here we're looking at using a semicolon to connect sentences that also has internal punctuations. Usually those are commas. And the sentence reads like this. I'll read this part. When dinosaurs agree on something, they often high-five one another. Dinosaurs are all about high fives. Now, there are three parts of this. There are three clauses. Two of them are independent and one of them is independent. One of them is dependent. See if you can figure out which clause is dependent. If you're thinking the first clause, when dinosaurs agree on something, that's correct. That's because the first word of this clause has the word when in it. That cannot be a sentence by itself. It's a prepositional phrase. You need something else. You need the subject. In this case, the second clause provides the subject. They, in this case, the dinosaurs, will often high five one another. This is an independent clause. You can have this sentence by itself. Dinosaurs often high five one another. And then the third clause, dinosaurs are all about high fives. So one is a dependent clause. So you must have a comma there. And it's connected to the second clause, which is independent. They often high five one another. And there's more. The writer wants to say that dinosaurs love to high five, love to give high fives. They're all about the high fives. So, because you have clauses 1 and 2 as the first complete sentence, but you want to connect it with clause 3, you would use a semicolon to separate the first big chunk of the sentence, which has 2 clauses, with the third clause, dinosaurs are all about high fives. So the use of semicolons, especially when you have more than 2 clauses and you separate them with a comma, one of them has to be a dependent clause, like this, that's when you use the semicolon to separate them. However, if you're stuck, you can always just make it into a period. So, when dinosaurs agree on something, they often high five one another. Instead of a semicolon, you can put a period. That's fine too. But but a semicolon is a technique of showing how the clauses relate to each other, and there's a connection. Another use of the semicolon, this is what you've seen in the notes. This is rule number 3 for semicolons. It's about the super comma. You see this in lists. Again, take a look at this sentence. The last one in the lecture talks about places in Canada. Now we're talking about places in the world. Seattle is in the state of Washington, that's America. Tokyo is the capital city of Japan, and London is the capital city of England. So we have 3 different countries: the USA, Japan, and England. So we're looking at cities in these countries, and the way to separate them is to have semicolons for the different countries, but commas for the cities in that country. So that's using the super comma. When you have 2 categories in the list that you need to work with. In this case, it was city, comma, country, semicolon. You see? You can also do this with locations, which you talked about, names. So if you use, for example, APA, I'll use my name, for example. Names. So my name, for example, would be Chan. It's my last name, Angus. And then if I were to add more names, I'll use my colleague's name, Mueller. Shauna. Like this. And then another person, Antonio. So like this. So last name, first name. You see? Comma. So before, you could have city and country. So that's location, and names and dates could be July 23rd, 2018. Oh, let's say tomorrow. Okay. July 24th, 2018. Oh, not 2108. That would be. And so on. See? Descriptions as well. So you might be talking about hamburgers. So here's an example of a description. So for example, we can have a person's name and then a description. And then you keep going. Name 2, description 2, and so on. So this reads, my favorite people include 1. Samuel Slaughterjaws, a famous unicorn hunter, semicolon. 2. My uncle Wilford, a world champion at mayonnaise eating contest, semicolon. And 3. Nikola Tesla, the most awesome dude to ever fire a lightning bolt at an angry peasant. So that's number 3. So you can see here name and of the person. That's Samuel Slaughterjaws and Uncle Wilford and Nikola Tesla, and then the descriptions. Unicorn hunter for Samuel Slaughterjaws, world champion at mayonnaise eating contest for Uncle Wilford, and most awesome dude to fire a lightning bolt at an angry peasant for Nikola Tesla. So these are sort of joke examples, but the lesson is there. You can use the semicolon as super comma to describe detailed lists with locations, names, dates, or descriptions. So we covered all these things: locations, names, dates, and descriptions for supercommas. And that's it. And here's a last sentence. Godzilla is a misunderstood creature, semicolon. Beneath his raging desire to set people on fire and eat them as lies a gentle giant who just wants to cuddle. Anyway, see if you can figure out what the two independent clauses are and how the semicolon works to connect them together. We have Godzilla, who is misunderstood, and he just wants to cuddle, even though he lights people on fire and eats them for some reason. Anyway, if you want to look at other lessons on this Oatmeal website, it's totally welcome to. It teaches you other grammar points and academic points as well in a funny way. Well, hope this was fun and helpful at the same time. If you have any questions, feel free to ask and post on Canvas. And you can always also email me as well. Good luck and have fun with the grammar day.